It's like, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 reward. It's a $100,000 reward. Have fun, Toasty. I love you.
Do you love me?
I love you too. Do you love me?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Love you too.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Would you stop eating my mints?
I think you want these spicy sugar discs.
A spicy sugar disc. Get out! Hello, welcome back to a new video. My name is Sarah, and today I'm going to be talking about two books in particular that I commonly see criticized for not having a coherent plot or a very structured plot. And I kind of want to talk about why I think that these books not having a plot is part of the point of the books. So the two books that I'm going to be talking about are The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern and Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Now I know that these are also criticized for other things besides having a lack of plot. I'm not going to talk about those other criticisms. Today I want to focus more on just this specific point on why I think that these books were meant to not have a structured plot. This video will have spoilers in it in order for me to fully explain my thought process as to why these books aren't supposed to have a plot. I have to kind of talk about what actually happens in the book and some specific details to them. So I will leave a timestamp for when I start talking about each book down in the description box below, so you can either click to that specific timestamp. I mean, there's only two books. I will give a very obvious warning as to when I'm going to start discussing each book, so that you can either click away if you don't want the spoilers or click on the timestamp down below to skip ahead to the second book that I'm going to be talking about. I also want to say that I'm in no means disregarding this critique of either of these books. I do agree that it can be problematic. It can really steer a lot of readers away to not have a plot. I know that there have been several books that I have complained about not having a plot, and that I actually really don't like because of that. I just talked about one back in my March wrap-up, so I'm in no means disagreeing with people as to this being a criticism. I just kind of am putting in my perspective on it as to why for these two in particular, I actually like that they don't have a lot of structure to them, or it feels like there's just not a lot going on or not a huge driving force to these stories. So the first book that I am going to be talking about is The Starless Sea. So if you don't want to hear about spoilers of this book, if you haven't read it yet and you don't want spoilers, click out of this video or click onto the timestamp down below if you want to skip ahead to the Turtles All the Way Down discussion. So go away, shoo shoo, if you don't want to be here for these spoilers. Okay, you better be gone. I warned you. So this book in particular, I actually wanted to discuss this one first because I feel like it's the hardest book out of the two to really A, explain what's even happening in this story, and B, explain kind of why I think it's not supposed to have a plot, just because it's a very abstract, whimsical story to begin with. So in The Starless Sea, we follow our main character, Zachary. He's in college and he stumbles across a book in his college library that has a memory of his written down in it, and it's a memory that really nobody else would know about, nobody else should know about, and so he goes on this adventure to see why this memory is written down in this book, who wrote it down, and where this book came from. He ends up finding out that he needs to look for the Starless Sea and the harbor, and the harbor is this underground library filled with books and stories and story lovers, and it's depicted in the book that has his memory written down in it, and it's also depicted in a different book that a different character has a hold of that has one of his memories in it. And so the way this book is structured is that we alternate chapters. One chapter is an excerpt from one of those two books, and then the next chapter is following Zachary and Dorian, the other character that has the other book. And so in these excerpts, it starts out kind of as an informational piece on the harbor and the Starless Sea, and then it branches out into more of these whimsical short fairy tales that you soon find out are actually all tied together in the Starless Sea. These tales either occurred in the harbor or in the area around the harbor in different parts of like different little islands on the Starless Sea. But when you're following Zachary, it really feels like he's just kind of meandering his way to the Starless Sea. There's not really much happening. When he gets there, he finds everything to be in disrepair, falling apart. It's like half destroyed, run down, kind of decrepit, in comparison to how he read about it in the book, where it's all very lively. The place is filled with people. There's all these different people who are dedicated to the Starless Sea, either to curate, protect, or just enjoy the stories that it has to give. But that, when Zachary gets there, that's not the case. And so he's just kind of like, I don't know what to do now. There's like a slight antagonist with a woman who wants to close off the doors that lead to the Starless Sea, but really she's not like a huge part of the book. And as the story kind of meanders its way on, we kind of just follow more a series of events that the arrival of Zachary and Dorian triggers, and less Zachary and Dorian being more like proactive and actually like acting for and moving forward and causing these events. It's more just a bunch of effects from them arriving. And so, but the reason why I think that like that's the whole point of this book is that this is a story where you do have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in your like traditional sense where there's a driving conflict in the whole middle and it all ties up at the end. I think this book is actually, it's not a full story. This is the end of the Starless Sea. So this is a story about the end of stories, because all of this stuff has already happened in the Starless Sea. All of these events in the books that Dorian and Zachary both read, they've all already happened. That is the story of the Starless Sea, and Zachary and Dorian, their only role is to trigger the end game of the Starless Sea and trigger its self-destruction. So traditionally, books are typically written where your main character is actually taking an active role in the story that you're reading, whereas Zachary and Dorian, they're really kind of just bystanders. The story started way before them, and it all occurred way before them, and now it's just kind of tying up loose ends, and a new one is going to begin after them. This book is, I think, hard for a lot of people to get into because it's so experimentally structured, and because it's, like I said, there's no real driving force to it. Dorian and Zachary are really just watching a story unfold and close around them instead of taking actual part in a story. But if you think about it, the Starless Sea is for people who have a great love for stories, and when you read or listen to or watch a story unfold, you're not necessarily taking part in the story, you are more just a witness to it. And that's how Zachary and Dorian are to this story. It's kind of a weird layer of witnesses where us as the reader are witnessing Zachary and Dorian witness the end of the Starless Sea. But I hope that made sense, and that's why I think the Starless Sea is not supposed to have a structured plot, is because it's not a traditionally written story. It is more of an experimental story about the end of stories. Okay, so I'm done talking about the Starless Sea. I am now going to start talking about Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. So if you have not read this book and you're wanting to and you don't want any spoilers, click out of this video now. This is the last book that I will be talking about. Like I said, this video was just going to be about these two particular books. If you don't want spoilers, click out of this video now. Otherwise, I'm gonna start talking about it, so you've been warned. So Turtles All the Way Down is John Green's latest novel. He's very well known for writing coming-of-age YA novels. I read all of his other solo works back in high school, and then this one came out while I was in college, and I didn't read it until about a year and a half ago. I noticed about halfway through the book that it felt like not a lot was going on, and I know that that is a lot of people's complaint about this book. Turtles All the Way Down is a story about our main character, Aza. She's a high school, I think she's like a junior, high school student. She suffers severely from anxiety and OCD. And she has her best friend Daisy, and one day there is like a notice. There's an announcement like on the radio or on the TV that a local billionaire has went missing, and Daisy happens to know the missing billionaire's son because they both grew up going to the same summer camp as children, and they've kind of lost touch with each other, but Daisy thinks that maybe the son knows something about the billionaire's disappearance. So Daisy thinks that if Aza can reconnect with Davis, the missing billionaire's son, that they can get any sort of information maybe leading towards where the missing billionaire is and get the $100,000 reward that is out for, you know, any information. And so, you know, that sounds really exciting. It sounds like a murder mystery coming of age romance story. However, that's not what this book ends up turning out to be. It starts out where we're kind of working towards Daisy and Ava meeting up with Davis and trying to reconnect with him, and then that's like maybe the first 15% of the book, you know, 15-20% of the book, and then the rest of the book, there's not a lot going on. You're really watching Aza just kind of spiral into a mental breakdown while life is moving on around her, and this Daisy's still wanting to solve this murder mystery or at least gain information for the reward, and Davis is struggling with his own predicaments with his father missing, but his father also being kind of a distant father, and also just kind of not being a really good person. And then Davis just kind of not knowing if he can trust Aza because he thinks that she's just out for the money, while she's actually she does get like a little invested in the relationship and stuff, but really like that all is just kind of briefly mentioned, it feels like, until the very end, where we do find out what happens to the dad, the missing billionaire. But everything in between there, it feels like one giant monologue of Aza's thoughts. And so that's like a big complaint from the community about this book, is because it feels like there's just nothing happening. However, we all know John Green loves his metaphors, and I really think that this book as a whole is a metaphor for what it's like to live with anxiety, where you get really lost in your own brain and the world around you keeps moving forward, and there's all of these things going on, all of these just big exciting things like a murder mystery to solve, and you're not really present because you're too wrapped up in your own brain and all the intruding thoughts. And so all of your thoughts and your anxiety really takes the forefront of your life, and all the outside things happening, all of your relationships, the activities, your hobbies, all of that stuff ends up kind of in the background of your life and your, I guess, your story, you know? And it's even really mentioned there's a part where Daisy and Aza have a discussion about how Aza doesn't really seem present in their friendship because Daisy writes a lot of fan fiction, and how, you know, she just met Davis, and Davis has already read a bunch of her fan fiction and is supporting her and encouraging her, whereas Aza's been friends with her for years and really hasn't read any of Daisy's projects in years. And so how she's just not really there because she's too wrapped up in her own brain. So I think John Green putting more of a focus on Aza's inner monologue and less on the actual events of the book is just one giant metaphor for what it's like to live with those intruding thoughts. And I know that doesn't make for a very exciting plot-driven book, but I think it's a really perfect representation of what it's like to live with anxiety and just mental illness in general. So yeah, I think this is just kind of another experimental writing project where there's a lot less focus on the plot and a lot more focus on just the main character, more of a character study, which you really don't see a lot in YA fiction, which is why I think maybe this didn't have the same impact as John Green was hoping for, and maybe a lot of people didn't quite jive with this story as well because it's not a typically structured or typically written YA novel. But I think that he did a phenomenal job with his mental illness representation and with the message that he was trying to put out there. So I do still totally understand if people don't like these books because of their lack of plot. Like, trust me, I get it. I just kind of really wanted to talk about why I liked them because of their lack of plot, and what I think the authors were intending to do. I may be way off, I may be way out in left field, you know, that's fine, because I think reading is really a very personal journey, and everybody gets something very different out of each book that you read. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear in the comments what your thoughts are on these two books. If you agree with me, if you disagree, if you have a completely different theory as to why they don't have a very well-structured plot or a very driven plot. Yeah, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I would love if you considered sticking around and subscribing, but otherwise I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!